Hey, it's Matthew Cudmore, and welcome to a special Memorial Day edition of Story Behind the Stone, recorded live from the Military Women's Memorial at Arlington National Cemetery. Today, we're facing a tough question. What if the biggest threat to veterans' heritage isn't time, but silence? We are honored to bring you our final speaker, the President and CEO of the Global War on Terrorism Memorial Foundation, Michael Rodríguez. Rod's entire life is defined by multi-generational service. He is a retired U.S. Army Special Forces Green Beret with 10 deployments, the grandson of World War II veterans, the son of a Vietnam veteran, and the father of a soldier with 4 deployments of his own. Today, Rod leads the historic, congressionally designated mission to build the National Global War on Terrorism Memorial right on the National Mall and next door to the Vietnam Wall and the Lincoln Memorial. Representing 3.7 million post-9/11 veterans and honoring over 7,000 fallen service members, this landmark breaks history as the first national war memorial planned during an ongoing conflict. It is designed to be the most inclusive tribute ever built, honoring both uniformed and non-uniformed personnel who stepped up to serve. Stay tuned for this inspiring and forward-looking address, anchored entirely in the Foundation's core pillars of honor, heal, empower, and unite.
I am truly honored to invite and introduce our next guest, Michael Rodríguez, to close us out here today. I was talking to Rod earlier on how should I introduce you, and he just said, tell him anything. Tell him I'm a soldier. For some context, he is a soldier, but much more than that, he is just a driven man with purpose. He's the CEO of the Global War on Terror Memorial. And what he's doing is building this memorial, and it is going to have such a prominent space right next to the Vietnam Memorial. And Rod's going to tell you more about this. It is truly an honor for him to come and close out and bring his perspective. He has served with the Special Forces, the Green Berets, 10 deployments. And the inspiration and the story and the presence that he brings is beyond words. I can't really do a just introduction. You're going to have to get to know the man himself. So I'm going to call him up here and you'll get a sense of what I'm talking about.
Thanks, man. Well, I would like to kick things off and wish a hero of ours, a brother of mine whom I never met, Anthony Shine, who's buried in Section 60, not far from here, actually Colleen's father. A very happy birthday today. As he said, I just go by Rod. You know, when the military, we wear last name tapes, right? So Rodríguez, kind of hard to say sometimes, I think. Rod is a lot quicker, so I was Rod. My father served in Vietnam was Rod. My grandfathers and all my great uncles fought in World War II, Rod. My son is a much taller, stronger, better looking version of me. They call him Little Rod, drives him nuts. He's in the Army. And of course, you know, the mother of our 3 monsters is Mama Rod. She served for 21 years and deployed 6 times as well. So that's just Rod, right? And a little bit about my family history. As my homeboy from north of the border up there was telling you, I'm the president and CEO of the GWOT Memorial Foundation, the congressionally designated nonprofit tasked with building a national global war on terrorism memorial here in Washington, D.C. Now, if we had about 8 hours, I could give you a piece of the 24-step process to build a National Memorial Museum here in Washington, D.C. And I would definitely invite one of my colleagues, Mary Kay, to come up here and help me. So, but I won't go into that. You know, as a soldier doing what I did for a number of years, I consider it an absolute blessing to have served my nation and humanity in the capacity that I did. What inspired me to serve was, as I mentioned, my father served, and you know, apple trees make apples, right? You know, they never really talked about their service. Right, they never really did. I saw the pictures of them from way back in the day, these young men, and my abuelita's, my grandmother's house, and they never really talked about it much. But when they did, they never talked about war. And those of us that have stepped in that arena and stepped out, I'm not glamorizing it. Yeah, I was a sniper. I'm not going to tell you sniper stories. I'm not who I am. That's not how I was raised. But what they did do was they spoke about the men they served with and those that never came home, and they spoke about them with reverence and love. And these are incredibly stoic men. I grew up in southern New Mexico on the border. My family's from this portion of the United States. When it wasn't the United States, the border crossed us, right? Which was a blessing for us. So very stoic men, but they would speak, like I said, speak about them with love, and it impacted me as a young child. So I was like, well, I want to pursue that. I want to see what that. I want to grow my familia, right? I want to grow my family. So I did serve, and I was blessed to serve in the capacities that I did. I think I Forrest Gumped my way through my career and meeting some incredible people. But my first deployment, I joined the Army. I was in the Army, I think, 7 months. I joined in 1992, and then into 93. I was about 7-8 months in, and they're like, our unit got activated, and they're like, hey, you guys are deploying to Somalia. I'm like, yeah, I finally get to deploy. And I'm like, where's Somalia? Like, where is that? I didn't know. And for those of you who remember, I think everyone's here long enough in the tooth to remember that what was going on at that point. It was called Operation Restore Hope. And we were there initially sent to ensure the warlords stopped stealing the rice from Mogadishu and Kismayu and ensure it got inland where the famine existed. So we did. And that was my job. The unit I was with, we escorted the food to those that needed it. And I tell you this because as young, I think the dumbest private the Army ever had, we would go, and I'll never forget the first time we delivered rice to one of these camps. It was in Baidoa, which is about a 7-hour, 8-hour drive. We pick up the rice, fight our way through Mogadishu, kind of, and then take it out inland. I remember the first time I pulled up, I looked across and you see all these little huts and these makeshift canvas tents. And it was, I think, Care and Concern, the two NGOs were there at that point. The ICRC was there too. They were making sure to feed these children. And then I saw it was hundreds of these huts. There was probably over 1,000, maybe more people. And I saw them. And then as they see these trucks pulling up with the rice being escorted by the United States military, I see all these figures get up and start walking towards where they're going. And as they get there, as we got closer, I realized they were all children, every single one of them. And, the typical, everyone, as I say, famine, people distended bellies, less teeth, no hair, extreme malnutrition, so the body does. But I will say this, those are some of the most beautiful smiles I've ever seen in my life. That's what I see. And I still see them. So it was in that moment, like I said, the dumbest private the Army ever had. I realized in that moment, the United States military and those that serve doing a number of capacities no one ever really talks about. No one ever feels the need to share because it's just what you do, right? Yeah, we hunt down bad guys and do what we got to do. We're really good at it. No one's ever been as good as us. No one's ever going to be, and we're going to keep getting better. But we also provide hope, safety, security, freedom, those that it was true oppression. I witnessed true oppression. I was like, I'm going to do this as long as they let me do it, right? Until they kick me out or I got blown up too many times and they kicked me out anyway. So I say that as a background for how my military career started, really what drove me. Again, blessed to serve in the capacities I did, progressed, went to selection, did all the other cool guy stuff that people see on TV and things. But that doesn't make me special. That doesn't make me different than anyone else here, right? And I think a lot of veterans feel the exact same way. We make different career choices. We do different things. But no one in the military, particularly for those that have seen combat, I want to go to combat. Send me to combat now. That's not a choice. You choose a path and units deploy. Some don't. It's just you do what you do. But you do it out of love of country, love of your family, love of self. And every time I've been deployed forward, I've seen that. And the thing that is common every single time I've deployed or even back stateside doing training and being away from home, missing more birthdays and holidays than I care to mention or I even remember, every one of us is committed to the mission. I know forward, for those of us that have worn the cloth of our nation before, if I'm standing next to someone, I can count on them. They say the same words I did, and I can count on them, and I'd take a bullet for any one of them. And I love every one of them, which is why I was really happy to wish your father a happy birthday today, even if I haven't met them. Right, that's a family. So that's where I came from. Now, fast forward to what I do today. I never, as a young kid, thought I'd be building a National War Memorial. Right? How did I get here? I don't know. It just ended up so happening. I was presented with the opportunity to do this. I joined the team. The foundation came together in 2015. I'll give you a little history on us. There were several veterans trying to do it kind of on their own. Building a national memorial on sacred space, the nation's front lawn, is probably one of the most difficult things to do if you want to build something. And those that have been involved in that can say, and building something will exist as long as this nation. I never realized that till I was talking to the Secretary of Interior, and I was giving a briefing and some stuff, and he stopped me and goes, "You realize what you're doing?" I said, "Well, yeah, I'm trying to." He said, "No, you're building something that will exist as long as this nation exists." I didn't. I'm looking at the 5-7 meter targets in front of me, trying to get to the finish line. So they came together in 2015. I joined the team in 2016. And in 2017, we introduced a piece of legislation to seek exemption from the Commemorative Works Act of 1986. Now, the CWA of 86 was written and stated that a war has to be over for a period of 10 years before a national war memorial can be built. I don't fault them for that at all. Why? Someone be like, "That's stupid." No, not really. It was 1986. That was the thought. Wars are bookended. Wars happen for a period of time and they end. That was the perception or the belief at that point. So we introduced the bill in 2017, swept through the House and Senate. President signed it in August of that year. And all of a sudden, this good idea fairy became a reality. Like, oh, crap, how do you do this, right? How do you do this? The board turned to me like, "Hey, Rod, can you step in a leadership position?" I'm like, I'll try. At that point, my youngest son, my motivations to join this sacred mission was my son was getting ready to enlist. Mother of my children, she was still serving active duty at Bragg. We're Bragg people, airborne all the way, right? So that was my motivations. I was at home. I'd been medically retired. This small 501c3 nonprofit, because that's the vessel to build all the stuff here, which I think is great. The process, as I go through this, I hope I'm not throwing shade at the process. I'm glad it's this challenging to do this. It's a sacred space. So I'll try. So stepped in leadership 2018, and here's a little more history, some stuff that goes on right over there across the bridge. So in 2003, Congress deemed the reserve portion of the National Mall, which is what you would consider the National Mall, closed. They deemed it a finished work of art. Nothing new has been approved since 2003, had been. The outside area, it's called Area 1. There's an Area 2, but we don't need to go into that. Area 1. So I'll mention some memorials, some prominent memorials that exist in Area 1 right now. World War I Museum, Area 1. The Eisenhower Museum, Area 1, right? Those are two memorials that exist outside the reserve. And here's some background about the National Mall. The most visited site, I think everyone can probably guess, in all of Washington, D.C. is the Lincoln. Next three are war memorials: Vietnam, World War II, Korea, and then MLK. So it's a sacred space. If there's a center of that for foot traffic and visitation, it's the Lincoln, and then everything else out there. This is not my memorial. I have a lot of experience in this, but I'm an expert, not. I'm an expert in my family service, but I'm not. So I sought out input from others, like, hey, where do you guys think it should go? If you think it's okay to be in Area 1, okay, fine, I'll build it in Area 1. If you want it in the reserve, I told them I have to go back to Congress to pass a bill that no one has passed, but tell me, that's my job. That's my responsibility. Everybody, even the lawmakers, the veterans in Congress that helped us get the first bill passed, are like, what do you mean it's not going there? Well, heck yeah, go pass another bill. I'm like, oh, it's that easy, right? Okay. So that's what I did. Started the process. Met with the various agencies that exist that govern this space, which is another complexity. Told them, this is where we want to build it. They're, Rod, you can't. I go, well, I'm aware of the 2003 closure, but I know if I go to Congress and ask for this, then, they're like, Rod, this is 2008. And they were honest. I love everyone that works in this space because they're diligent. I know where they're coming from. They don't sugarcoat anything. I get beat up all the time. They're like, Rod, look, we're going to be honest. Like, everyone has tried. Everybody's failed. People with a lot more influence, a lot more money. Remember, I didn't have any money. Have failed because 10, 15 years, tens of millions, still not going to happen. I said, well, I'm very open and transparent. I don't sneak around. I don't do no. And they're like, okay, go ahead. So I tried. And so I effectively went back to work, passing what ended up being called in closed doors, the impossible bill. Like, this is never going to happen, but we'll support you. This ain't going to happen. It took 2 sessions of Congress, but then President Biden signed my bill into law. And then in 2022, I effectively overturned the apple cart in this space. Upset a lot of people, but I'm here to succeed in this mission. So during that process, those years of me doing that, I understood in the 24-step process, we get to the design piece. My job to understand my operational environment. It's one of the soft truths that I was used in the military. Special Operations Force truths, there's certain things you follow. And one of them is understanding your operational environment. So I took a deep dive. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, all those that have built everything here in this beautiful city prior to me. It's all a matter of public record. If you guys want to spend some time, go and dive into that. So I read that and to understand my operational environment. And I knew that we'd get to design, but I always wondered how many Vietnam veterans, the very first National War Memorial built in our city was 1982 with the Vietnam Wall. As an artist, I got into art when I was in Walter Reed, just north of here. I got introduced to art. I found out that it's the purest form of communication. It communicates a thought, feeling, and emotion. It tells a story, and it's subjective. We can all look at a painting and I'll be like, man, that's beautiful. And you all can be like, man, that's crap. And we're all right. That's all civic art. So I wondered, even as a veteran, it would be impossible for me from an objective standpoint as a veteran or finding another veteran designer to design it. How can you do that as a vessel of the voice? And I don't know how many Vietnam veterans Mylan talked to. I have a cousin on that wall. So I wanted to be sure the voices were heard. So I took a very deep social, psychological, and anthropological view on what does memorialization mean to humans? What do we mean? What does it mean to us at our core? I don't know if anybody knows this, but the very first structure out after we built the fire pit, when we were living in caves, the very first structure mankind built were burial mounds. So our cave system in South Africa has caves, Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. They found remains of them, but in one of the caves, as you follow it, there's one of the caves that you'll go up in there, and there's a chamber. That's their cemetery, their burial mounds. So that's the core of who we are. And if you think about it, just take a step back, I would think one of the definitions of humanity. We're the only species on this planet that do that. So memorialization is at the core of who we are. So knowing all this, I decided to take a very different approach. And look for a world-class designer that could step into this Shark Tank with me and design something with ability, credibility, and humility, with humility being the center pillar. Right? Nothing against artists, but I want to be sure an artist that would be involved and understand that it had nothing to do with them, because it's got nothing to do with me. We found one. Concurrent with this, I created a design advisory council of our stakeholders, because I wanted to tell the whole story of this incredibly complex and difficult to define war that people will dispute. If you ask two veterans, they're in here. What's the global war on terrorism? What's the global war on terrorism? You're going to get two definitions. But let's bring everybody back to the reality. So the Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, the Global War on Terrorism Expeditionary Medal have been awarded in the Caribbean, in South America, in the Pacific, in Africa, and the theaters you guys are probably thinking. This is a global war. At no point in time does anybody consider a named operation its own separate war. They call them wars, but they're named operations. Does anybody in here consider Operation Overlord, the D-Day invasion operation, its own war? No. Part of World War II, right? So I say that again because what we've been working on is incredibly complex. It's a complex war. How do I define this? Given the small percentage that has been fighting it, but I wanted to tell the whole story. For those of you that don't know, the very first KIA, combat casualty, wasn't even in the Army or Marines or Navy, Air Force, or he was a gentleman by the name of Johnny Michael Spann. He was killed November 25th, 2001, worked for the CIA Special Activities Division. I was fortunate in my career, placed a breach of charge, compound goes off, we run in, do what we do. People running in after me, dressed like me, looking like me, carrying the same stuff. You know, why don't we ever talk about that? And it wasn't until 2019, the Department of Labor tried to put out a report to find out how many have we lost, right? Because that's tracked by DOL, not DOD. American citizen, you die outside the continent of the United States, working for an American company or furthering American interest, they track that. That's their responsibility. 2019, let's figure this out. And they published a report, and I was dumbfounded by this number. So we're over 7,000 uniform. There's over 3,400 non. Think about those families that no one talks about. If they weren't a veteran, they're not buried over here in Section 60, but the majority are. We don't even talk about that. Now let's talk about those that serve again, the community. I heard you guys talking about this earlier when I came in. They don't feel the right to, they don't feel like I need to tell my story. I don't want to tell the story. You know, I agree we need to engage them prior to their separation so they tell their stories. Nobody's better at diminishing their service and sacrifice than the veterans and their families. It's hit me square in the face in 2016 when I started working on this. And these are friends of mine, right? I bled and cried with these guys, right? And I was like, how are you doing that? We don't need that. Why? And then I was like, what do you mean? I know why I'm doing it. I'm doing it for my 56 friends that aren't here anymore. I'm doing it for their families. I'm doing it for the families that have yet to give to this nation, because the war of terrorism is still going on, right? It's a little more kinetic now. It's going to ebb and flow, but it's still going on, whether people like it or not. I don't engage in policy or politics. I didn't write the policy that sent me to war, that went my children to war, my son to war. I talk about people and patriotism, my 4 Ps, right? So I wanted to tell the whole story. But in addition to that, I want to tell a story about the families, because the most difficult deployment for me was when I'm standing at Green Ramp at Fort Bragg. Green Ramp is where everyone deploys. It's the shoot shed. It's all ceremonial. They have the plane sitting right there, and and you give them that hug of hope, hoping it's not the last hug, and you watch your loved one go into the bird. So I'm sitting there on Green Ramp. I had been medically retired. I'm standing there with Kelly, the monster's mom, Mama Rod, right? And she's still active duty. And we're watching our young 18-year-old 82nd Airborne Infantryman son deploy to the Helmand province of Afghanistan. One of the most inhospitable places on this planet. I've been a lot of places, and Helmand is man. He was going there to do the quick reaction force mission. He's going to fight. I know that. That's what he's going to do. There's always fighting. They throw infantry guys at it and hope for the best. So as I give him that hug of hope, as the patriarch of our family, I'm trying to present that strength, and I'm like, oh man, I'm like falling apart inside, and I'm thinking, maybe this is what my dad felt like when I deployed to Somalia, maybe in '93, and in my subsequent deployments in my career. And then I started thinking more. I'm like, there's no way my dad wouldn't know what that was like. He watched me graduate airborne school and go fight the Viet Cong. Or my grandfathers watched my father complete his artillery training in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and go fight Nazis who served in the Pacific. So I say that, and it's somewhat striking, but that tells you the length of this war, the complexities, but we also want to recognize the families, right? The 4 tenets that I wrote in 2018 when I stepped in a leadership position to keep me on azimuth, my North Star, first one being honor. So that white star you see right there is where this memorial will be built when we pass the impossible bill. Now, the second tenet I'm going to touch on, heal. Heal is a subjective term. It could mean personally. It could mean emotionally, physically. It could mean relationship-wise. It could mean as a community. It could mean as a nation. Heal. Remember I said this is art. It's open to interpretation. Heal. We got to focus on that. The third thing I touched on briefly, empower. Great word. But I wanted those that have given so much to feel valued, to make them feel like their story mattered. Because, again, the people that are pushing back the most were those I was trying to honor. So I started asking the question. When they say no, I said, all right, do you know someone that didn't come home? Does their family deserve it? Or maybe you saw someone come home and lose the war at home to suicide, like 7 of my friends, or to some mysterious illness that they probably should not have gotten. Do they deserve it? And they'll be like, hell yeah, heck yeah. They know, okay, good, stop right there. You think about them, because I'm thinking about you. And that reframes it. But really, that little thing I just explained to you guys there captures why people raise their right hand and serve in uniform or out of uniform in that way. We sure aren't doing it for money, not for self-aggrandizement. They don't know who we are, the vast majority. They don't even want to tell their stories because, like my first deployment, when you go and you see that, you see certain things. I'm not worthy. Like, how can I tell that? Look at these people that are suffering. So most humble people you meet are those that have seen the chaos, those types of situations. So I wanted to empower them. I wanted to bring their voices. So we had a 23-member design advisory council after we secured the artists to sit and listen as the vessel of the voice. I told them, I said, look, sit on your hands, put your pencils away. I need you to understand our population. So over a period of about almost 2 years, they sat with these design advisory council members and the board members that were veterans, CalWOT veterans. And they listened because an inspired artist will create brilliance. So they sat and they listened and they listened. But in addition to that, I wanted to be sure I captured the voice of America. So I started getting data, qualitative, quantitative data that I would need to give to a designer. Green space, do you want a flag? Do you want water? But also ask questions like, what do you want to feel? What do you want to learn? What do you want to take away? We had about 200, it was just me and a clipboard, right? And we went digital with it, and it was a 5 to 7 minute survey. We blasted out called Help Design History. And within a period of about 5 months, I had the goal of capturing voices from all 50 states and all the services. That was all I had hoped for. They didn't have to put their name. We didn't ask for names. I just wanted whatever demographic information they wanted to share to include their periods of service. 20,000 people filled out this 5 to 7 minute survey from all 50 states, every service, and every veteran generation from World War II to today. And what's beautiful is if you look at these things, it wasn't just checking the block. There was some substance in there. They all sound the same. So that shows the love for those. So I wanted to bring that here, the voice. So those that do serve, those that have given so much, and those that we've lost and their families will feel valued. I think the greatest asset we have as humans are those that are willing to step forward and serve in some capacity. And if we have those that are willing to put their lives on the line, I mean, we wouldn't be here. And that's what creates this bubble that allows us to have opportunities like this. But a bubble is fragile. We need to make sure we respect the bubble, honor it, but we have to understand how important that is, even though we can see through it, right? So if someone is seen and heard, they're going to feel valued. If someone feels valued, I know what they probably won't do is take their lives. I look to history, the shoulders I stand on, to figure this plan out. And what you guys are hearing this plan laid out is written on my whiteboard I wrote about 8 years ago. Contingencies all over the place, right? But if we think about the Vietnam Memorial, that when it was built historically, the 3 soldiers weren't part of the initial design. That was somewhat of an afterthought or an addition too. But it's 3 men. 9 years later, okay, let's recognize the women that serve, which is very emotional. They're all emotional. There's something about that one as a medic as well. I just like, oh man, it squeezes my heart. But what about those veterans that we are losing to the war at home? My father, thankfully, is still with us, but he fights Agent Orange every day. Several of his friends aren't here anymore, and him and I share a commonality that we have friends that have killed themselves. Okay, then let's put a plaque on the ground in a corner that no one even notices or sees. 4 different efforts. I just wanted to do it all at once, to recognize and honor everyone that has served, but to show the commonalities between us all. And I'm going to share a design element with you guys. Like I said, I took a deep dive on this. So some of the earliest recorded evidence of man are footprints. There's some footprints in New Mexico, and they tell a story. So when you guys do visit this memorial, you'll be greeted by footprints. These footprints are going to tell a story. You're going to see footprints. You're going to see women's footprints, and then you're going to see boot prints. But there's going to be a differentiation. There's going to be steel inside those footprints, depicting the weight of war. And there's several sets of footprints that we're going to have, but then you're going to see if the footprints stop and they're steel, we lost them at war, male and female. But you're also going to see families walking side by side And then the family keeps going. You're also going to see those that are walking, recognizing the war at home. Empty footprints, filled footprints, empty footprints, last two footprints, because that's the war that took them. So those are some of the design elements that you're going to see that we'll be unveiling actually here pretty soon. That's, part of the empowerment and telling that. Now unite. And the fourth tenet, and I'll close on this. People say diversity is our strength. I would strongly disagree. The most diverse organization you're going to find is the military, without question. But what makes them strong? The unity. It's not a diversity. It's a factor. Of course, I'm not ignoring that. But what makes this nation strong is our unity. Everybody remembers September 11th. We're coming up the 25th anniversary. But also everybody remembers September 12th and how we felt as a nation. That's unity. That's our strength. It's not diversity. Yes, it's a factor. I'm not diminishing that or saying it's not a thing. But our strength is in our unity. And that's one of the things we hope to capture with this. So now that I told you that we're going to be unveiling the design here pretty soon, you'll have a chance to see it. I'm going to make sure it's a YouTube live thing, right? So everyone can see it. So that's all I got. And I've been talking way too long at this point. I think I went over time. So thank you guys very much.
You can see why introducing him is so difficult. You just needed to hear him. I do a lot of leadership work, and one of the things I often say, it's not what you do, it's who you are while you do it. That's important. And as I was sitting and listening to you, Rod, and I see the values come up, it really put this day together for me. Because as we see everybody sitting here, we're inspired by values. But the most important thing is integrity. And I think that's what it takes when we do commemoration is integrity. And integrity is acting for the sake of the action, not the outcome. We don't know where we're going. We don't know the future. But if we inform it by our values, that integrity, we can't do wrong. I just encourage you to live those values, act in alignment with those values for the sake of the action and all those we remember and came before us.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Story Behind the Stone is available on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and on the Reach Across America radio network, on iHeartRadio, Audacity, and TuneIn. Just search for Wreath. Thank you for tuning in.